Nowadays, it's not that difficult to find an interesting game on the Play Store, and that's actually a really good thing, but of course there are still a lot of games that end up being completely hidden with less than 100 downloads. And usually these are some really interesting games. Well, on this list, you're going to see exactly this type of game, super underrated games, so you already know, drop a like and come with me. If you like RPGs but prefer something a little more complex, you need to try Sea of Fantasy. In this game, the main villain is basically a character who lives under the sea. So because of that, your character ends up learning how to fish and defeat all the fish you find along the way. The game has a pretty interesting fishing mechanic, which is almost the main RPG system of the game. So you'll be fishing a lot, but at the same time, you'll also be defeating plenty of enemies. Besides that, the game has an open world for you to explore as much as you can, along with many other gameplay elements. If you enjoy RPGs and you're tired of all the other ones on the Play Store, this one is definitely worth trying. I recently watched the movie based on this game and I was really impressed by both the game and the movie. Let's talk now about the Exit 8. It tells the story of a normal worker who ends up trapped inside a subway station. The game has around 3 different paths, and every time you reach the end you go back to the beginning. The main goal of the game is to find the anomaly. If you find one, you go back. If you don't find one, you move forward. It may sound pretty simple, but sometimes an anomaly is just a button in the wrong place, and besides that, an anomaly can also be a bunch of crazy monsters running after you. It's a good game and definitely worth trying. This is one of those games that will make you want to throw your phone against the wall, but it'll be worth it. Let's talk now about the Gardens Between. In this game, you play as 2 best friends who are going through a crisis, so to speak. You'll understand a lot about the story, but they are drifting apart quite a bit. That said, you'll play through different moments of their lives and solve various puzzles to understand the story and also solve the problem. Usually the maps look like what you're seeing here, a big island with several different areas for you to explore, and you need to reach the top to collect something. It's a really good game when it comes to this platforming system, but I think its main highlight is the story. This is one of those games where you can easily spend 100 hours playing. Let's talk now about WYTHWOOD. In this game, you play as a forest witch. From what I played, I discovered that one of the main goals is to explore, and it's one of those games that gives you a lot of freedom to do whatever you want, even though the game has quests that take you to different places. Usually these quests involve helping other inhabitants of the forest, and of course, since you're playing as a witch, the main part of the gameplay is making all kinds of potions to help the inhabitants of the town. It's a game that leans more toward the relaxing side, with a good story for you to follow, but without any pressure. I was just testing this game and I actually got pretty addicted to it. It's a really interesting card game. Let's talk now about YOHANE the PARHELION. From what I was able to find, this game is based on an anime that wasn't that successful, but that doesn't really matter. Honestly, the story is pretty easy to understand. You go into the world of mirrors and you need to find a way out. Along the way, you end up facing your best friends who are your enemies in this inverted world. The game also follows more of a roguelike format, but in this case, it's a turn-based RPG that is also a card game. The more enemies you defeat, the more cards you can get, as well as more upgrades for your character. However, I need to tell you that if you die along the way, you have to start everything over, just like a good roguelike. The funniest part is that this game has 3 different versions for you to play. Let's talk now about PARTIA. You could say that this is a strategy game or maybe even a tactical RPG. As you can see in the gameplay, it has a pretty simple format. You have several characters and need to move them across the squares to defeat the enemies. Unlike other games in the same style, this game has a very different story concept where you make certain choices and decide the path of the kingdom. And as I already told you, there are 3 versions from PARTIA 1 all the way to PARTIA 3, for example. They all follow the same story and of course the same gameplay style, but the most surprising thing is that none of them ever became successful on Android. You know those games that just work really well and get you addicted because of their gameplay? Let's talk now about Pepper Grinder. Honestly, I don't know much about the story of the game, but it's probably something generic where you have to defeat a big villain who wants to take over the world. But what really stands out about this game is the gameplay. You have a drill or something similar to that, and you can use it to defeat enemies as well as move through the sand. Not only that, you also need to collect all the coins you find along the way. The combat and movement gameplay are really addictive. It's a hidden game on the Play Store that I'm sure is gonna get you hooked. Look at the graphics of this game, they're absolutely beautiful. Let's talk now about a very hidden game on the Play Store called Pixel Mega Shot. objective is simple, but the gameplay is extremely complex. The ship you're on ends up being invaded by aliens and several other weird monsters, and you need to escape and make it out alive. What the game lacks graphically, it makes up for with its gameplay. It's very smooth and it feels really good to shoot the enemies. Besides that, there are platforming sections where you need to jump around, solve some problems, and collect some keys. It's a relatively simple game, but the gameplay is really fun. This is one of the most underrated games I've ever found on the Play Store. Seriously, let's talk now about PSICOSIS. This is a 2D horror game where you play as a child who is going through several problems. And to deal with these problems, the child creates several imaginary friends who end up helping in different situations. But of course, since we're talking about a horror game, these imaginary friends eventually get out of control. So you need to investigate and find out whether they are actually imaginary. Unlike other games, this one takes you through different stages of the child's life where you try to understand what's happening to him at home, at school, and in several different places. A while ago, this game was a huge success, but nowadays it's pretty forgotten. Let's talk now about SAIKO no SUTOKA. This is a pretty funny horror game where you have to escape from a girlfriend who wants to kill you. In Japanese, there's a very famous term for this kind of character, which is tsundere. So one day you're with your girlfriend and she ends up kidnapping you and throwing you inside a school. She likes you so much that she might actually kill you, so now you need to find a way to get out of there and of course get her back on track. I think the most interesting thing about the game is the different endings, since technically she isn't really a big villain. So you can do certain things that can help her, or you can simply run away. You know that type of game where you don't really care about the story, you just want to jump around, defeat enemies and finish the game? Let's talk now about Magic Sword Adventure. I honestly don't know, but I have a feeling that this game was made by just one person, and if for some reason you came across this video, congratulations, the game is really good. This is the type of game that doesn't have a big story. It's basically a platforming system where you collect coins, these blue items, and defeat as many enemies as possible. The gameplay is focused on the platforming, the jumps work really well, and it's one of those super simple games that somehow ends up working really well. Well, usually when we talk about RPG games, you're going to save the world with a main hero, a warrior, an archer, but here, my friend, you are the healer. Master Healer is a new game that was released on the Play Store. It didn't become very popular, but it looks really interesting. The goal of the game is for you to play as the only healer on the team. You need to save the world and of course save your friends as well. You have different types of abilities and you need to use them at the right moment to keep everyone alive. The most interesting part is that you usually don't actually defeat the enemies. You simply serve as support for the team, and my friend, you really need to think carefully before using any ability. It's one of the most different RPGs I've seen recently. I think we can say that this game is unknown because it's very old on the Play Store. Let's talk now about MISGUEDED Never Back Home. We're talking about a game from 2014 and a lot of people don't know it because of that, but I have some really good news. It ended up getting a remaster, so now it runs more easily on more powerful phones, and of course it also looks much better. This is a horror game that feels a lot like Silent Hill. The story follows a female character who is searching for her missing best friend. She ends up entering a house looking for her, and of course things quickly get out of control. This is the type of horror game that you usually don't find on the Play Store, and honestly, if you enjoy this style, it's definitely worth trying. In this game, you're basically just an amoeba with a life inside a laboratory full of weird people. Let's talk now about MO Astray. We don't exactly know why the amoeba ended up coming to life, but now you control it. The only thing it wants is to get out of there and see how the world works. It wants to see the daylight. However, the laboratory is huge and of course something went very wrong. There are zombies everywhere, spikes, and now it's one of the most dangerous places in the world. So now with this little amoeba, you need to get out of there without taking any damage, otherwise you die. The game also has some interesting platforming systems, but at the same time it has a very intriguing concept, and unlike the other games on our list, this one is really difficult. Well, you know those roguelike games that are extremely simple? You already know exactly what you need to do. That's exactly what this game is, and we're going to talk about it now. Nerd Survivors is that type of roguelike where you need to survive for as long as possible. It has an isometric gameplay style, and of course enemies come from all directions trying to kill you. At first it looks like just another simple roguelike where the main goal is to survive for as long as possible. But the game ended up impressing me quite a bit because of the number of characters you can collect. Honestly, I didn't count, but there must be more than 50, and all of them have completely different abilities and playstyles. I only managed to unlock around 10 of them, and it really feels like an endless game. a game that was very successful a long time ago but is pretty forgotten on the Play Store nowadays. Let's talk now about Forgotten Memories. In the game, you play as this character. I forgot her name exactly, but she is the guardian of the Forgotten Worlds, where there are usually a lot of toys and other objects that people end up forgetting and that eventually make their way into this world. Everything was normal and she had been the guardian for quite some time until a rebellion happens because of one of the members there. After that, it's up to our character to understand what's happening and why this rebellion happened, because the game kind of reminds me of Limbo but with a much more interesting story and of course better graphics as well. Look at this. I've never really liked first-person RPGs, but this game looks pretty interesting. Let's talk now about Fortune of Battle. I think we can say that the game is a dungeon crawler where you're going to try to survive for as long as you can, defeat as many enemies as you find along the way, and lose as little health as possible. What really makes the game different is that it's in first person while also being pixel based, and it has an RPG system where you roll dice. It really reminds me of older RPGs, but at the same time this can be pretty frustrating because I always end up losing those dice rolls. It's a game with potential. It was also released recently and currently has less than 200 downloads on the Play Store. Unfortunately, this game isn't that famous even on PC, and it eventually got a mobile port. Let's talk now about Gunfire Reborn. This game is funny because at the same time that it's an FPS, it also has a roguelike format. In the game, you're inside a dungeon and need to defeat several enemies, collect XP and level up your character. However, unlike other games that usually lean more toward the RPG side, this one is a very well made FPS, and not only that, the game also has plenty of upgrades and different weapons that can completely change your character, and even though it's a completely offline and paid game on the Play Store, you can still play it in co-op with your friend if you're near them. Honestly, I thought this game would be much more successful. It looks like a really interesting game. Let's talk now about INMOST. This game theoretically has 3 characters with different stories that end up connecting at the end. You play as a girl, a lost child, and her gameplay is very similar to a puzzle game, but along the way, you also play as an older man whose gameplay is much more focused on a platforming system, and in the end you play as a samurai who of course has gameplay much more focused on combat. I didn't make it all the way to the end of the game, but people say that the story is really emotional, and of course with all these different gameplay styles, you really never get tired of this game. This is an idle RPG, or we could also call it a management RPG, and I'm sure it's going to get you addicted. Let's talk now about Legion-Bound. The objective of the game is simple, but at the same time extremely complex. You need to survive with your characters while defeating as many monsters as possible. However, every monster you defeat helps evolve your characters, and with each evolution you can fuse them or add another one to your team. And speaking of characters, the game has many completely different characters, from archers and warriors to even mages. The focus of the game is to make the biggest fusion possible or evolve your characters as much as you can so you can defeat as many enemies as possible. And imagine a game where you have to manage an ant colony. Yeah, the idea is pretty crazy, but let's talk now about Ant Colony. I think we can classify this game as a strategy game, or maybe just a normal management game. You start with a regular ant colony and begin managing your ants, both the workers and the ones that are going to fight. The focus of the game is to grow as much as you can, while of course trying not to lose your ants. The beginning may seem pretty simple, like you'll be opening tunnels and of course like creating more ants for this, but later on things start to get more difficult, where you'll need to protect your location and even the rain can get in your way, and surprisingly it's actually a pretty good management game. Maybe we could describe this game as a dungeon crawler. It's a pretty unknown game, so let's talk now about Dark Raider. Honestly, I don't know much about the story of this game, and actually I don't even think it has one. You're playing as a character inside a dungeon and you need to find a way out. What the game does really well is its gameplay. Unlike other games with more fluid gameplay, this one has much more responsive combat, very similar to a Souls-like. Besides that, the bosses and enemies are all really difficult to defeat in this game, and honestly it's the type of game where you don't even understand why it isn't famous on the Play Store, because it really should be. I simply love the story of this game. I played it all the way to the end and it's really emotional. Let's talk now about The Light Journey. In the game, you play as a young character named Emily. She lived happily in her country until a civil war broke out, and as if that wasn't already bad enough, she also ends up becoming blind in the process. The interesting part is that you basically play through her entire life before the war, and of course is a good part of what happens afterward as well. The main goal of the game is to find her parents again while also finding a way to leave the country. The The gameplay is really good, but I think the main focus of the game is the story. There are many characters and a very sad story, and I'm sure you're gonna get addicted. Of course, just by looking at the name of this game, you already know exactly what it's about. Let's talk now about DOKIMON. This is a very recent game that was released both on PC and Android. It's basically a copy of Pokemon, but my friend, don't be fooled into thinking that it's just a bad copy. In fact, there are more than 9 characters for you to play with, each with completely different stories. There are also more than 140 Pokemon for you to collect, and it's worth mentioning that they are pretty unique. There are more than 25 hours of story, and of course many maps for you to explore. It's really a very complete and very new game, and it has less than 100 downloads on the Play Store. Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles is so underrated that you may have never even heard of this Final Fantasy game, but of course we're going to talk about it now. This is a completely different Final Fantasy that was released for the Dreamcast, if I remember correctly, and of course it wasn't successful at all. The interesting part is that it's available on the Play Store for you to play. It's a very different game from the more famous Final Fantasy titles. For example, you don't have any of the super famous characters here. It basically works as a spin-off, and even the gameplay is something a little different. It's somewhat similar to a turn-based RPG while also being an action RPG. A really different game, but one that nowadays is viewed pretty positively. And that's it for today. If you found a game you didn't know about, leave a like and subscribe for more hidden games. I'll see you in the next one.